Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My questions without notice was to be given to the Minister for State-Owned Enterprises, but because he's not here, can I be allowed to ask the Honorable Prime Minister? Mr. Speaker, in yesterday's one of the two dailies, the Post-Courier, the front page was blackout. But since then, no response has been given to many of those questions that our good journalists in Post-Courier exposed. And therefore, I wish to take this opportunity to remind the Honorable House, through you, the Speaker, and ask certain questions on the state of affairs with regards to the PNG power situation. As you and I know, very recently, over the last 48 hours, in the nation's capital, blackouts has been the normal thing for all of us. The last blackout was 2 nights ago, lasted about 4 hours. The whole city was in blackout. And I'm sure there are experiences everywhere, and we know the consequences of frequent blackouts, impact on computers, generators, etc., fridges, etc. Mr. Speaker, few issues have been highlighted, and I wish to remind through you the Prime Minister on the issues and therefore request answers to those issues. Number one, it was highlighted that there has not been a proper board in place over the last 2 years. And therefore, without a board, obviously the consequences are directives and decisions are not made. And therefore, when, Mr. Speaker, can this important entity with its enormous problems, when will the board be established? And I recommend at the earliest possible time. One of the issues that was raised in this front page was, and I quote, power systems on a time bomb. Our view on the opposition is there is sufficient generation of power, for example, in the city. Let me confirm that. In 2013, the 2 gas generators since then are now online. 2019, the 50 megawatt power plant by Allsets also is online. 2020, the 40 megawatt zero power, I think recently, I think only last week, after so many months, is now online. And so we believe on this side of the House that so far as generation is concerned, there is sufficient generation. The information that we've been advised is that the last technical audit on PNG Power was carried out in 2001. There has never been any more technical audit on this important public infrastructure. And therefore, Mr. Speaker and Prime Minister, can the government immediately undertake that important audit so that we know exactly, and our position is, it's in the transmission and the distribution infrastructure that is wanting right at the moment. And the symptoms are the frequent outages. On an average, we have been told 4 to 10 outages can be experienced within 5 days, which is not acceptable. It demonstrates that it is the transmission, it is a substations, it's a transmission lines, and also the lines that we go from house to house, business to business, the distribution lines. We are also advised that in the Port Moresby grid, it will require about 70 million to address those. Mr. Speaker, to the Prime Minister, if that is confirmed, can the Prime Minister make a commitment on this very important public infrastructure that that budget provision be allowed for in the next year's 2022 budget? Because power issues lead up to increasing cost of business, and all of us know that. Mr. Speaker, another issue that was highlighted by this report was power theft. Some business houses have been named. They are averaging that we are probably losing 25 million a month. That's a lot of revenue loss. And also for those independent power providers, PNG Power owes them close to, I'm told, 600 million kina. So this entity really needs very close attention by the government. I know, I don't want to point fingers because all of us have been around. Many issues have not been solved, but I think there is an opportunity now for the government under the leadership of the Prime Minister to really focus on try and address some of these issues. And if it confirms that 70 million is required to do maintenance of the transmission and distribution lines and substations, why not? Because it's one thing. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, on a personal and representing my people of Abau, the power to Kuikila stopped, and it's been there, stopped for 40 years, Mr. Speaker. The latest World Bank NEROP report did categorically say that immediately 15 to 20,000 households can be immediately hooked up if the power extends beyond Kuikila. Can I ask the Prime Minister to inform his good, hardworking minister that extension of the power grid from Kuikila be considered so that it reaches another part of Papua New Guinea called Abau. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Prime Minister.
All right, thank you, Mr. Speaker, again, and I'd just like to appreciate the member for Abau for asking this very important question for PNG Power. In fact, PNG Power is a sick organization, has been sick for many, many years with a lot of issues, and we can't go back too far into the future. We are here as government now to address this. So I thank to heart the council that the member for Abau did offer. Let me say we have not sort of sat back and we look at the board issue that he has made reference to. I can say there were two positions that are vacant, and there's two vacancies we will fill at the very earliest. There has been some adjustments issues. When we took office in 2019, we did desktop analysis on the state of our state-owned enterprises. Key amongst them were the 4 state enterprises that we really targeted: PNG Power, PNG Water and Adiranu, and the amalgamation issue, telecom, PNG and the communication sector, as well as Air New Guinea. And we thankfully giving support to them to ensure they, despite the weaknesses they carry, they still remain focused in as far as contributing to save our country. All these organizations also are operating at loss. Almost half, if not 60 to 70% of our users are not really good paying users, if I could put it this way. And these are the inherent weaknesses we have inherited and taken in, but we have tried our very best to clean. For instance, PNG Power, for the first time, all the bills that have stacked up, I don't think, I was finance minister for 7 or 8 years, I don't think there was one blank check of 100 million paid to PNG Power in the 7 or 8 years I was finance minister. I think we paid 105 million kina to PNG Power to clean up some of the state debts. There's a state debts that we've been carrying for so long, and PNG Power sometimes wants to cut power off from state organizations, but we remind them, sorry, we are paying, and we've been saying we are paying for the last 10, 15, many years, and there's a lot of factor that goes behind the sorry state of PNG Power. The 2 generators, for instance, we were supposed to set up, have collected dust in Leh for the last 5 or 6 years. And, you know, we spent well over 100 million kina plus in the 2 generators. Yet they're collecting dust in Leh, and they've completely gone down. They were asking for another 50 million kina, 50, not 15, to refix it up. And we said, let's go into hydro and let's go into gas sort of power generation instead of burning another 50 million kina to reconfigure that generator space. In the last 5 years, thankfully, new power came on board, and now Dirio is throttling here to supply Central and NCD. The Dirio power installation will supply about 27 megawatt, but there's a teething issue in as far as the step up and uplift of the power and feed into the grid. There's no connectivity to Port Moresby because the current connection from the existing generation site where new power and Dirio operate side by side can only uplift what is being generated by ExxonMobil and new power. The latest bout of blackouts has stemmed from the fact that I think new power decided to switch off supply, and I've asked new power to not to do this. They switch off because we have not paid them bills for the last 5 years again. And so, as take of ad hoc inefficiencies that we've inherited and part of the cleaning up, in fact, in the last 2 years, we've cleaned up well over 2 billion kina worth of outstanding areas and contracts and bills that government have inherited. We've carried. Part of that was the 105 million kina that we transacted for PNG Power. So let me give assurance to the Honorable Leader who asked that question, as well as to the House and to our country. PNG Power remains very much our focus, and we also look at a reform in that space on how best we could look at reforming the generation, the transmission, and as well as the retailing aspect, so that the power company becomes more efficient. Part of the step towards that reform, we established the National Energy Authority, separate from PNG Power. PNG Power becomes just one power supply company, and the Energy Authority becomes a regulator. So, to summarize, the call for technical audit is absolutely correct, and I give you the assurance we will look into this space. We're cleaning up those areas that we've carried with PNG Power over many, many times, including the 100 million that we've paid. And just on a side note, PNG Power also owes IRC quite a substantial money for the taxes that they also should have paid. And so that's another issue. PNG Power told us that 100 million kina was picked up straight by IRC. And we're working to ensure PNG Power is okay, we all okay, power still remains. The infrastructures are aging. Most of the infrastructures have been the same infrastructure we've had since 1975 or since whenever it was all built. And so the recommendations to look into that has been considered by Cabinet. There's a $250 million ADB program coming not just for PNG Power but our state-owned enterprises. And when that is funneled through, PNG Power will receive a substantial part of that allocation so that we make big intervention, and places like Port Moresby and those who live in and out of Port Moresby grids can have access to reliable power, because that is the quickest and easiest place of paying bills and bills collected. So consider that those issues in PNG Power will be addressed hopefully around Christmas. The Minister for State and Enterprises would announce the new boards and the new direction in which PNG Power will go, and consistent with another announcement he will make. I can't preempt the announcement. There will be a substantial announcement on the reform on the telecoms sector also that he is doing or we are doing. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.